Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney. Thank you for joining us. In today's show, as part of our special election coverage, we introduce you to the candidates running for Louisiana Public Service Commission District 1, which we cover in the second half of our show. But first, in part one, we will discuss COVID restrictions by local and state governments and when and how the government may impose them, and when might such limits be going too far when our individual rights are concerned, and when our local businesses or economy are being harmed too much. We have Dr. Paul Race, a constitutional law professor and now retired medical doctor, who will be joining us for that discussion. I would like to welcome Dr. Paul Race, who is a professor at the Southern University Law Center. Dr. Race has a degree in both medicine and law and has practiced professionally in both fields as a scholar. His expertise includes areas of health law, constitutional law, local real estate law, and torts. Dr. Race utilizes his knowledge and experience in both medicine and the law to develop the next generation of scholars and legal professionals at Southern. His interests include a range of topics from health policy to constitutional law. Therefore, we're very pleased to introduce him to you and welcome him to the show. Dr. Race, thanks for being here.
Oh, good to be here.
Well, this is a huge topic, and it's been debated a lot in this election period, but well before and surely long after, where the government, the local government, mayors, also the governor of the legislature, and even on the federal level, all these restrictions, mask mandates, businesses being impacted, a lot of businesses may be going bankrupt and gone forever as a result of people not being able to go to work, plants being shut down, and it's a big deal what the government feels like they've had to do on many levels, and people individually not being able to send their kids to school. There's a lot to talk about, so how about we get right to our questions?
Yes, that'll be good.
Okay, so let me pull up my questions, and the first one I have for you is first question, I'm sorry, I thought I had it right ready. So what is the power of the federal versus the state versus the local government as it relates to this health crisis and as it relates to the general health, safety, and welfare of the public?
Very good question. The federal government actually derives their power from their power to regulate commerce, which was exclusively given to the federal government. And that means that they can regulate movement of goods and all the things that have to do with the movement of goods and services and people and the things necessary for that across state lines. And to that end, they actually passed a law basically a while under this power to regulate public health, and that gives power to the CDC, specifically with regard to illnesses, things that can go across state lines. And so that's where they derive their power from.
And you said the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control?
Centers for Disease Control. Okay. The state is different. The state has general police powers. And so that under police powers, we say health, safety, and welfare. Health, safety, and welfare basically means they can do whatever it takes to take care of us in terms of that situation. The city actually is just a subsidiary of the state, which means the state can tell the city what to do. They actually have that power. The city does not have independent power from the state. Ultimately, that's where their power derives. Now, in Louisiana, the city nor the state can declare martial law, but they can declare a state of emergency, which everyone in New Orleans knows about. Yeah. And so therefore, in a crisis such as what we have, under their power to declare a state of emergency, they have the power to mandate mass, distance, police, all of that. Now, if the state steps in and tells the city no, then reality is that the state rules over the city.
Well, and hopefully we'll have time to get back into it, but getting to the sort of the main categories, let's keep going. So on the topic of the governmental power, there's also balancing that against what a lot of people consider to be civil liberties that are guaranteed to them. The freedom to do what you want to do and run your business as you feel like you should be able to do. Freedom to associate, things like that. How do you balance that?
Well, that is a political question, but ultimately people have a right to do what they want as long as they don't affect other people. So your liberty, your civil liberties tend to stop when they start to affect other people. The whole concept of mask is based upon the protection of everyone. The primary purpose for mask, and this has been said many times, is to prevent you from infecting other people. So it's closer to DUIs and driving under influence, driving while drunk, as opposed to you smoking. You can smoke all you want, you can hurt yourself all you want, but when you start driving under the influence, you start to affect other people. And so when you refuse to wear a mask, you are actually affecting everybody else. And that's where there's that balance.
And so there are people out there who say, well, I feel fine, and I don't think I'm infected, so I shouldn't have to wear a mask, except, number one, you might be infected and not know it and be spreading the infection, the COVID infectious germs. And maybe that's why, as a safety precaution, the state says wear the mask just to play it safe. And your example of driving while intoxicated, you may say, I don't think I'm drunk. Well, but maybe you are. And number two, you could harm somebody else. And you gave me an example before we taped, saying even smoking, there's something called secondhand smoke. Your smoking can harm somebody else too, including children who
right. That's why they stopped smoking on planes. Because of the risk to other people who flew the plane, but especially to flight attendants who have to be on that plane. So we've had many, many laws that are out there based upon you as an individual hurting other people, regardless of what you have thought. Now, I accept and believe that there is a balance that has to occur in terms of the economy and what has to be done. The problem is that the state has a right to enforce. Now, we actually have not. This state has not tried to enforce masks. We've tried to encourage. But as I heard one physician say the other day, we have this problem where I am now risking my family trying to take care of because of this outbreak, and this outbreak is occurring because people refuse to wear masks. And that is just a problem. So.
All right. Let's keep it moving.
Yes.
What about it, though? You mentioned in Louisiana, we were doing pretty good. Initially, we had an outbreak, but then we were doing really good. Now, here we are in latter part of November. We're seeing spikes. What can or should government officials do with folks or businesses that refuse to comply with the restrictions that the government is encouraging or requiring, as far as shutting down businesses or requiring restaurants to limit how many people come in?
If people had listened to the experts, this is not a surprise that we're having a big peak. What probably should have been done early was shut down, get control, make sure it's not an issue, open up in the summer, letting everybody know that this may happen again in the winter, so that they are prepared for it. The problem is that they never really did what they were supposed to do before. And so they went with the volunteer way of doing it, and it did not work. I think at this point, either you shut down some of the businesses, or you strongly enforce the mask, the 6 feet. And I see people online all the time who have no concept of what 6 feet is. I'm 5'10" and a half. As I told my son one day, you're too close. If I can't lie down between you, you are too close. And we have people 2 feet apart, and they think that that's fine. So the bottom line, if we want to give people more rights, more businesses more rights, then we're going to have to force them to enforce mask, distancing, space, and what that means is either we punish that business, which you can punish by civil fines, you can punish if they really mess up by closing them, or the other thing you can do is enforce the police to help the businesses, which basically means if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, call the police and then have them escorted out, trespass. The bottom line is there is no right to go into a business and tell them that I'm not wearing a mask. Just like a business can say no shoes, no shirts, no service, they can say no shoes, no shirts, no mask, no service. You can't come to my house and tell me that you're not going to wear a mask. You can't go to a private business and tell them.
That sounds like great advice. Well, we're just about out of time, but and I think you mentioned before, this is not like we've never seen this movie before. You mentioned before, we've been down this road before, recently with Katrina, where the state had to invoke emergency powers, but also we've had a pandemic before 100 years ago, correct?
Correct. And the 1918 pandemic killed a lot more people actually than COVID has. It was one of the worst pandemics ever. It was the worst pandemic going back to the Black Death, and people were not honest, and it caused it to spread even more. But in the meantime, by the way, the federal government started isolating people and quarantining people. Well,
it looks like that's all the time we have. I wish we had another hour for this. It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Race. Everyone, please stay tuned for our next segment, where we will introduce the candidates running for the important position of the Public Service Commissioner. Thank you again, Doctor.
My pleasure.